Hi everybody, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Juan, I am just one reader, and I am here to discuss a topic that I find really fascinating, short story collections. Now, the idea for this video actually came from a conversation that I've been having with Nathan, the lovely Nathan from the channel Nathan James. He's a booktuber, one of my favorite ones, one of my favorite people on the internet actually. We've been having this conversation about a particular short story collection that I will mention later on in this video, and it's a short story collection that I read this year and loved it, and then he read it and really loved it as well, and so we started talking about the importance of short story collections and how when you discover a really good one, you just want to read more of them. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna talk about what I think makes a short story collection great, and then I'm gonna tell you some of the short story collections that I've read recently and really enjoyed, and some of the collections that I really want to read in the near future, meaning in 2018. So, first things first, I think a short story collection or a short story as a medium, as a format, as a genre, if you could call it a genre, is a really special one. It's a really complicated thing because if you compare it to a novel, I think a novel has more space. Well, it has more space, and I think it has more opportunity to have ups and downs, pros and cons, but still compensate for its flaws with some good stuff. Whether it be the writing or the characters or some parts of the plot. I mean, because it's a combination of so many different things, a novel, there's a big range, a variety of things that you can like, and so if there are some things that you don't like as much, there are some other things that can compensate for that. So for example, some of the novels that I have read recently, that I have even given 5 stars to, have had some flaws, but I still gave them 5 stars, right? Now, if you compare that to a short story is really complicated because usually you have around 15 to 30 pages of writing, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes more, but it's very limited, so that makes it, I think, more complicated. I mean, for the author, it has to be really complicated, right? I mean, I'm not a writer, but I can empathize and think of how difficult it must be to write a good short story collection with such a limited space and time, and also for the reader. I think as a reader you really experience when a short story is good, is really good, it kind of elevates itself, and that's something that really has happened to me quite often this year and last year as well, is that when I read a really excellent short story, I'm just kind of just amazed and surprised that someone was able to create this and to make me feel and experience all of this in such a short period of space and time, right? So I think this is why I personally believe that when a short story is really, really great, I can like them even more than I can like a novel, because like I said, a novel has more limitations and more more opportunity for flaws and for different things, whereas a short story is just what it is. So, that being said, I will tell you some of the short story collections that I've really enjoyed, and I think it all started last year in 2016. I was never a really big short story reader. I read a couple of short story collections in high school, and that was pretty much it. And then I just sort of forgot about that medium until last year when I started to read a few of them. And those 3 collections that I read in 2016 actually made it onto my top favorite books of the year. So the short story collections that I read that year were these 3. This is A Guide to Being Born by Ramona Ossibel. It actually has like a thematic index at the beginning. So yeah, it deals with 4 themes, which are birth, gestation, conception, and love. So it's kind of a thematic short story collection. The short stories are really wonderful. Her writing style is so pure and vibrant and musical and delicious. And they are kind of magical realism-ish, fabulous, really, really good ones. Then I read Magic for Beginners by Kelly Link, which is, I think this is the collection that I read that made me feel, oh, so I need to read more short story collections, because I read the first story in this collection, which is called The Fairy Handbag, and it was such a great story. It was such a fun, little, quirky, magical story that I was just hooked, and the rest of the collection was just as amazing, if not better. There are a couple of stories in here that are actually some of the best ones that I've ever read. Stone Animals and Magic for Beginners, I think, are my favorites. Stone Animals in particular, I think, is a short story that you should read regardless of whether you want to pick the collection up or not. That story, Stone Animals, is incredibly outstanding. I mean, you should read it. And then the last collection that I read last year was 10th of December by George Saunders, which became my favorite book of the year. This is just such a feat of writing. It's amazing. The writing is kind of experimental and weird, and it's not very easy to get into his groove and to really get into his writing style, because what he does is he kind of drops you in the stories and doesn't give you any information to work with, so you have to sort of make your way into every story and figure things out on your own. But it's such a wonderful collection. Yeah, so now those are the collections that I read last year. Now, so far this year in 2017, I have only read 2 short story collections or anthologies. And I'm really sorry for that, because I should have read more by now. But I have read some really good ones. So I have read the best American short stories of 2014. This is, of course, not a collection, but rather an anthology, which means these are from different authors. There's quite a bunch in here. There are many. There's like 20 or 25 short stories in here, and they are consistently really very good. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this. There's a big mix in here: realist, magical, fantasy, or magical realism. There's a bunch of things in here. And then the other one that I read, which is the one that Nathan James also read and loved, was Fortune Smiles by Adam Johnson, which is such a remarkable book. I really think this is one of the best books that I've read so far this year, and it's one of my favorite collections as well. These stories are longer than your typical short story would be. The longest short story in here is probably like 60 or 70 pages, but they are so enjoyable, so delightful, and they have in the same vein as George Saunders, Adam Johnson has this kind of perfect balance of human, dark, poignant, funny, real, magical. There's just such a big variety in here, and he blends everything so well. So now I'm going to tell you some of the short story collections that I have on my shelf. Now, I am a short story collection hoarder. I have an entire shelf in my personal library dedicated to short story collections. I have probably over 50 or 60 short story collections on my shelf. So there's no way I can show you all of them. I'm just going to mention some of the ones that I'm really desperately wanting to read, and that I will try my best to read in the near future. So the first one I have is The Doll's Alphabet by Kamila Grudova. These are, I think, fantasy or magical realism stories. I picked this up because I saw that Acacia Ives really loved it, and I trust her, of course. The next one that I have is Delicate Edible Birds by Lauren Groff. Look at this cover. Oh, I love it. And I just finished reading her novel, Fates and Furies, and I gave it 5 stars. I fell in love with her writing, so a short story collection by Lauren Groff. Yes, I'm here for this. The next one is The World to Come by Jim Shepard. I heard or read somewhere that this is kind of similar to what George Saunders does, so there you go. Then we have Vampires in the Lemon Grove by Karen Russell. This and her other short story collection, St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves. I will probably be reading both of these collections in 2018. I am really looking forward to her stories because her novel, Swamplandia, is one of my favorite books. Then we have The Wilds by Julia Elliott. Julia Elliott wrote the new and improved Romy Fudge, which is a book that I thoroughly enjoyed and absolutely recommend to everybody. And this is her collection. It sounds like a very weird Southern Gothic kind of thing. I saw that Mercedes read it and didn't like it very much, but I'm still very fascinated by the premise of this collection, so I will probably be reading it next year. Then I have A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, which won the Pulitzer Prize, and this is a book that I've always wanted to read and I never have. I don't know why. That's just the way that I roll. And this is kind of an interlinked short story collection, meaning that the short stories kind of share the same characters or make like one big storyline, and I have heard nothing but great things about this one. Then we have By Light We Knew Our Names by Anne Valente, which I have heard great things about as well. And How to Breathe Underwater by Julia Oringer, which I think are more realist short stories that have to do with female characters growing up. And yeah, I think that's all I know, but I've heard Mercedes in particular, who is a big short story collection reader whose taste I always trust, she mentioned that this is one of her favorite ones as well. Next up, I have two really chunky collections or anthologies, which are the complete works of these two authors. These are the complete stories of Flannery O'Connor, and this is the complete short stories of Ernest Hemingway. So I don't think it's realistic for me to say that I will read all of the stories in here, but I really want to start reading these two authors' short stories because I've heard great things. Then I have one that, again, Mercedes really liked, and like I said, I trust her, and it is At the Mouth of the River of Bees by Kai Johnson. I think Chris from Chris Bookish Cauldron just read this, so yeah, I really want to read this. Then I have New World Fairy Tales by Cassandra Parkin. I really love fairy tales. I don't read a lot of them, but I really like them. I really think there's like a primal, primitive force there behind fairy tales. So yeah, this one sounds like, yeah, something I could really enjoy. Then I have Public Library by Alice Smith. Heartbreaker by Maurice Meyer, Kissing the Witch by Emma Donoghue, which is kind of a classic. Then I have two short story collections by George Saunders, which I also really want to read. This is Pastoralia, and this is In Persuasion Nation. And I will also be reading Civil War Land in Bad Decline this December. And the last one that I have here in this video is Get in Trouble by Kelly Link. Kelly Link wrote Magic for Beginners, which I talked about just now. And this is I think her newest collection, and it sounds really great as well. So guys, please let me know in the comments down below, what are your favorite short story collections? What are you looking for in a short story collection? What do you feel makes a short story or a short story collection great? And please let me know if there are any short story collections that you're looking forward to reading in the future. So thank you very much for watching. I am Just One Reader, and I will see you next time.